All right, and we go straight into it. We'll begin at this hour in Delaware. That's where we find VOA senior correspondent Carolyn Presutti. Carolyn, you've been with us on this journey for quite some time. Great to be chatting to you again from South Africa as we watch, along with the rest of the world, the situation unfolding in the United States. And what remarkable developments overnight for us here and throughout the day for you in the United States. Legal battles now in the works, talks perhaps of some protests in some states, and most importantly, an increasingly tighter race in key states.
Absolutely, Ayanda. What a day a difference makes, right? My goodness. I think by this time tomorrow in this country, and we're talking maybe 12, 24 hours from now, you'll have half the country very happy, and you'll have half the country depressed because either their man is in the White House or their man is not in the White House. But the real question is, which guy will it be, right? We have neck and neck races in many of those key swing states. It's really coming down to 6 straight states. But the bottom line is President Trump cannot lose any more electoral votes. He has to keep on building on those electoral votes and adding to his states. So that remains to be seen, and the remainder of the night here in this country, whether or not he can surpass the numbers that Joe Biden has achieved. Otherwise, today, it started out with the Biden campaign announcing a security briefing, an election security briefing, in which they explained their path to winning the presidency. Then later on in the day, the former vice president gave a speech to the American public. It was more like a unity speech. He talked about patriotism. He talked about really how this election belongs to the people. It seemed as if it was confident. He seemed upbeat. Some of the pundits said he seemed very presidential. And at one point in the conversation, he said, you know, I'm going to be a president for anyone, whether you voted for me or whether you didn't vote for me. He also said that we, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not bow down. And we, the people, is part of it's called our preamble to the Constitution. It's the very beginning of the Constitution. So invoking the Constitution, he is again sounding very presidential. He's invoking what is at the heart of all Americans. Meantime, we heard from President Trump on Twitter mainly. We did hear from his family. His family is still very upbeat about his chances of winning the Electoral College vote, and that certainly is still a possibility for him. But
right.
As we mentioned, it is narrowing in certain states.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, you know, we still technically can't call the election, but irrespective of which data you're using to track the polls and to track the results as they're coming in, safe to say most people would prefer being Joe Biden at the moment than Donald Trump.
That's very well said, and I think you're right there. And they would prefer to be Joe Biden supporters right now as well. I think a lot of people are wringing their hands. You know, the Americans were very tense about this election for many, many reasons. I mean, I think the pandemic just kind of ups the anxiety in this country overall, in fact, all over the world, but especially for voting, because a lot of people didn't want to go in person, and instead they voted by mail or they voted in person early. And so it wasn't quite the process that we're used to in this country. It wasn't the, hey, let's get the whole neighborhood together and go vote at our polling place. It was individually deciding when you would vote, how you would vote, how you would stay safe. And I think also we all felt the discord, whether you were for Biden or Trump. People are very polarized. They were definitely for one or the other, and it really has created a division in this country.
Absolutely. And, you know, hotly contested elections typically come with many surprises. I imagine, even though there's a whole host of emotions, including anxiety and fatigue that Americans are feeling, surprise, especially at Donald Trump's decision to head to the courts, is not an emotion many people are feeling. This was largely expected.
Right, because he did mention that early on or actually toward the end of the campaign. He said that he would challenge the result because he was having a problem with the mail-in ballots. He said, no, you can't trust them. So he didn't trust that those mail-in ballots would be handled correctly. He didn't trust that they would be counted correctly. And so he enforced the idea with his Republican supporters that they should go in person on Election Day, which was yesterday here in this country, which a lot of them did. Now, here's the double-edged sword, though. The fact of the matter is a lot of the votes that haven't been counted are those that were mail-in ballots. So which type of supporter mainly mailed in their ballots? The Democrats. So that's why you saw, if you notice the early returns, they were skewing towards President Trump, right? Now that we're getting some of the mail-in ballots and the earlier votes, they're skewing towards Vice President Biden, former Vice President Biden. So we'll have to see who wins out, and I truly believe that, by the end of the week, we're going to know who this president is. However, let's see how those court rulings come to be. Now, keep in mind, the president has said that he will take this case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. It doesn't really happen that way in this country. You have to first have a case. So you have a case where you bring a charge against someone or something with one individual case, and it progresses through the courts. So that situation would have to be brought by his attorneys at a lower court level and then eventually progress through the U.S. Supreme Court. And I can tell you almost to a person in this country, they're hoping that it doesn't come to that, because then that kind of invalidates the presidency for the person that is elected, should either of them then tie it up in the courts.
Right.
So this is uncharted territory, too. So we'll all learn this together.
Right, as we have for most of 2020, and here we are yet again. And, you touch on an incredibly interesting point there, Carolyn, right? How much of this is being viewed as nothing but pushing a particular narrative for the Trump campaign in the event that they don't actually win? And according to some commentators who are brave enough, they're already calling this election and saying, in fact, there are just so many more doors for Biden to enter into the White House than for Donald Trump, that it's more likely than anything that Biden will, in fact, end up in the Oval Office.
Well, you remember what the president said on Election Day. He was very honest when he talked with his supporters in Arlington, Virginia, Northern Virginia. He talked to his volunteers and his campaign staff. And he said, it's easy to win. It's hard to lose. And especially for me, it's hard to lose. So I think that was very telling that he is in a situation now where he has to decide what he's going to do. He's still holding out hope, I'm sure, that he is going to be reelected. And he can be. Let's not forget that. Yeah. If the numbers change tonight, yes, he still can be elected, because no one has reached that threshold of 270. But he's also probably thinking, what am I going to do if I lose? And in the past, if you've read anything about Donald Trump, he started out as a businessman, real estate mogul. I mean, he made his millions, his billions that way. But he's also tied up a lot of cases in the court. So he's kind of used to going to the court to figure out things, to figure out who's right and who's wrong. So will that transfer to this time when we're talking about the highest office in this country? Maybe so. And I'm sure he's confiding in his legal analyst right now to find out what the best journey should be should Joe Biden achieve those 270 electoral votes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're entering well into the evening there in the United States. Many people in South Africa waking up, catching up on the news overnight, so to speak. If you can, just capture the mood for us there on the ground in states like Delaware. I mean, it's been an incredibly taxing campaign. In fact, Joe Biden has admitted as much. And, how much of call it an interest really still exists amongst Americans as, we, I guess, enter the final stretch of vote counting?
Americans are extremely involved in this election. They are paying attention to it minute by minute. I mean, you just know when you are so into your candidate, you pay attention because you want to know the outcome. And nobody really knows yet, but I don't think anybody wants to wake up tomorrow and find out, oh, that happened overnight and I missed it, right? So you see a lot of tired eyes out here today. A lot of people were up most of the night, if not all the night. Now, tonight, can they stay up a second night in a row? I don't know. Delaware, though, is total Biden country. Delaware went for Democrats very early on election night. So this is all Biden country. They're all for him. He was their senator for years and years. So anyone around here is rooting for Joe Biden to win the presidency. Not everybody, of course, but most people are.
Yeah, quite safe to say. Well, don't worry.
Yeah.
If you do decide to catch a nap or two, we'll be watching things quite closely. Most of us feeling fresh and alive this Thursday morning here in South Africa. Thanks very much for getting us into the picture as best as you can. No doubt we'll be catching up with you throughout the course of the morning here in South Africa, perhaps the early hours of the morning in the United States. So that there, Carolyn Presutti, she's in Delaware in the United States, and she's a senior correspondent with Voice of America.